I crawled out of the fire scene, took out my phone intending to call the fire department. However, my husband appeared before me with his mistress and snatched my phone away. I was both angry and anxious. "Mom and Dad are still in the fire, hurry up and call." My husband glanced at the fire scene, and surprisingly, there was a hint of secret joy on his face. He indifferently tossed me a divorce agreement. "Sign this agreement, and I'll return your phone to you, allowing you to rescue your parents. We don't want this either, but if you refuse to divorce, Vivian and I's child will have to be illegitimate. After all, the child is innocent." I never imagined that my husband would use my parents' lives to threaten me. However, I also found it extremely ridiculous. Because the ones trapped in the fire were not my parents, but his. I struggled to push open the door, stumbling out of the fire scene, clutching my chest and coughing violently several times, taking deep breaths repeatedly, finally feeling like I had come back to life. Although the burn on my arm was very painful, I had no mind to tend to it. Instead, I quickly took out my phone to call the fire department and ambulance. But just as I held the phone in my hand, my husband David suddenly appeared in front of me and snatched it away. I had no time to ponder how he, who had disappeared for half a year, suddenly appeared at my doorstep, nor did I bother to argue with his mistress Vivian behind him. I just hoarsely pointed at the thick smoke inside the house and shouted, "Hurry, hurry, and call the fire department, call the ambulance, Mom and Dad are still inside." Upon hearing this, David not only showed no urgency but instead brightened up, muttering to himself, "Heaven helps me." After saying that, he coldly threw a divorce agreement at me. "Sign it, once signed, I'll naturally call the fire department to rescue your parents." I was quite angry and just wanted to speak, but my throat itched terribly, and I couldn't hold back a fit of coughing that left me disoriented. Seeing this, David snorted coldly, "Don't pretend here to waste time, I know you weren't in the fire for long and aren't really injured." My mind was buzzing. Could it be that David had clearly heard my struggles and cries for help inside, but deliberately pretended not to be there? David didn't notice my expression and continued on his own, "The fire isn't big yet, for every minute you delay signing, your parents will suffer one more minute inside. Don't blame me, I have no choice. It's you who has been refusing to sign the divorce, but if you drag it out any longer, the child in Vivian's belly and mine will become illegitimate. As a father, I can't let my child be ridiculed by others." I was entirely in shock, unable even to think of what to say. I just foolishly questioned, "Are you crazy? Do you know I could have died in there, and so could Mom and Dad?" Perhaps my voice was too hoarse and shrill, making David feel he had gone too far. However, soon, the nearby Vivian smugly touched her protruding belly and smiled as she spoke. "Sister, don't blame David. As they say, parents love their children and plan far ahead for them, so of course David would do the same for his child. Moreover, David stopped loving you long ago. You can't expect him to risk his life to save someone he doesn't love, or even someone he dislikes, right? Besides, it's you who has been clinging to him and refusing divorce. We had no choice but to force you to sign at this critical moment." I was furious to death. "What do you mean I refuse to divorce? The divorce agreements you sent me basically leave me with nothing. It's David who erred, he betrayed me and the marriage, he's the at-fault party. Why should I give up my years of hard work to fulfill you two adulterers?" David was stunned. "Leave you with nothing? What nonsense are you talking? What I gave you." Before he could finish, Vivian interrupted, "Sister, why make up these non-existent things? Isn't the urgent matter now to sign quickly so we can call the fire department to save your parents? Now, for the sake of not divorcing, you're letting your parents suffer in the fire. How do you have the face to question David?" I slowly stood up, dusted off the ash from my body, pointed at the fire scene, and sneered, "I might not have made it clear just now, leading to your misunderstanding. The ones inside the fire are not my parents, but David's parents." As soon as these words came out, David and Vivian in front of me were stunned. David forcefully grabbed my arm. "Are you serious? It's my parents inside?" I nodded, "Yes, so I advise you to call the ambulance immediately or rush in to rescue them, otherwise, you'll be the real culprit who killed your parents. After all, David and I had been in love and married for many years. He knew I wasn't someone who liked to lie, so his face changed, and he immediately wanted to rush into the fire to check. Vivian quickly grabbed David. David, how can you be so foolish? Have you forgotten? Last month, you bought tickets for uncle and aunt and sent them abroad for travel. How could they return without telling you and inexplicably come to find Claire? This is clearly Claire deliberately lying. She just doesn't want to divorce you, so she's intentionally delaying time to force you to go in and save her parents. If you go, with the thick smoke billowing, how can you tell whose parents they are? By then, if you risk your life to save them, she can say she's grateful for your kindness and continue to be with you, clinging to you even more. David also realized I was talking nonsense. Right, how could my parents be in the country? You said you'd never lie to me in this lifetime. How could you deceive me? I was utterly speechless, almost unable to hold back laughter. Seeing me like this, David became even more convinced that I was lying, just to avoid divorce and incidentally make him save my parents. He was even more furious. To avoid divorcing me, you're cursing them like this. You really disgust me. Vivian gave me a disdainful look. Besides, if you're going to lie, at least draft it properly. Uncle and aunt weren't kind to you. If it really were uncle and aunt in the fire, you'd probably be overjoyed. How could you think of calling for help as soon as you came out? Vivian's words were indeed correct. David's parents had indeed been harsh towards me. They always felt I wasn't worthy of the excellent David, had many complaints about me after marriage, and often stirred up trouble between David and me. If not for them, David and I wouldn't have ended up like this today. But I wasn't lying, it was indeed Devon and Daphne inside. Upon learning that David was with Vivian and planning to divorce me, they suddenly came to my house. I was very shocked at the time, and although their expressions towards me were full of contempt, they kept talking non-stop. You can't even hold on to a man, what can you do? I'm telling you, David just made a mistake that all men make, you can't divorce him because of that. Although you're not that great, that vixen Vivian disgusts us even more. As long as you promise to never divorce David no matter what, we're willing to accept you as our daughter-in-law. Since they arrived very late, I had to let them stay first, planning to discuss in detail the next day, but early the next morning, just as my parents went out to buy groceries, the house suddenly caught fire. I didn't like Devon and Daphne, that's true, but that doesn't mean I was willing to watch them burn alive in front of me. Moreover, the fire was in the vacation villa I specially built for my parents, and I didn't want it destroyed. But looking at David's demeanor, I knew further explanation was useless, because once he was convinced of something, it was hard to change, and this villa was in a remote location, with surrounding houses mostly for vacation and usually unoccupied. If delayed any longer, it would truly be too late. So I didn't explain any more, but picked up the divorce agreement, checked it, confirmed it was for equal division of assets, and signed directly. After confirming my signature, David nodded satisfactorily. Wouldn't it have been better to sign earlier? Why make your parents wait those extra minutes inside? I couldn't be bothered to argue with him and directly reached out. Give me the phone quickly, I need to call the fire department. David was about to return the phone to me, but Vivian snatched it away. You can't give it to her. Now not only I, but even David was stunned. Vivian, she's already signed, what are you doing? Vivian snorted coldly. David, how can you be so naive? She signed, but that doesn't mean we've gotten the divorce certificate yet. Don't forget, she refused to sign the divorce agreements we sent her so many times before, crying and calling you, insisting on talking face to face. Just now too. To avoid divorcing you, she disregarded her own parents' lives and even lied that it was uncle and aunt inside. Now that she's signing so straightforwardly, there must be something wrong, probably just temporarily deceiving you, and when it comes to getting the divorce certificate, she'll break the agreement again and refuse to get it with you. David looked at me, then at Vivian, seeming somewhat hesitant. I rolled my eyes inwardly, wanting to explain that I hadn't signed before because of the agreement's content. Now it seemed highly likely that Vivian was sabotaging it. I could explain clearly, but Vivian was silver-tongued, and David believed her. If I explained, it would just waste time. Seeing the fire gradually growing, I knew there was no more time for me. So I gritted my teeth and spoke humbly, David, look for yourself, the fire is about to get bigger. Whether it's my parents, your parents, or even strangers inside, you can't just let the fire spread like this. David frowned without speaking, but it was clear he was very hesitant. I then looked at Vivian. I've signed the divorce agreement, what more do you want? Do you really want to watch Mom and Dad burn to death? Vivian naturally ignored me. She pulled David's arm and shook it coquettishly. David, I'm a kind person, you know that better than anyone. I'm so compassionate even towards stray cats, how could I watch people burn to death? But as you can see, the fire isn't big at all, just the smoke looks heavy. I just hope we call the fire department a few minutes later, so her parents can suffer a bit. Once her parents suffer, they'll naturally know our power and will advise Claire to divorce you. This way, we have an extra layer of assurance, we can marry legitimately, and our child will be legitimate. Upon hearing this, David glanced at the smoke-billowing fire scene again and finally nodded. Claire, rest assured, I won't let your parents really get hurt. Moreover, this is originally your fault. If you had agreed to divorce early, I wouldn't have had to come find you. I was furious to death and had to point at the phone in Vivian's hand. David, open my phone and look at the photo album, you'll know I'm not joking about divorcing you. David was puzzled but still unlocked my phone and glanced at the album. You had an abortion? Why didn't you tell me? That was my child too, how could you decide on your own? I sneered. You disappeared for half a year, I messaged and called you countless times, and you never responded. How could I tell you or let you decide? If I didn't abort early, wouldn't you say I was using the child to force you not to divorce? David was speechless, but his expression was very sad. Actually, that's normal. Although David and I now seem like enemies, we once loved passionately and hoped countless times for a crystallization of our love. When he and I got together, Devon and Daphne looked down on me and refused outright. David fell for me at first sight. To interact with me, he passed by my favorite snack shop 800 times a day, just to say what a coincidence to me. After we started dating, to get his parents to agree to our marriage, David knelt before them without eating or drinking for 2 days, finally making them nod. But the love was real, and now the lack of love is also real. When he loved me, it was passionate, when he cheated, it was known to everyone. At that time, just after finding out I was pregnant, Vivian smugly showed her belly to force me out. I was furious to death, but David thought I was bullying Vivian. To prevent me from bullying Vivian again, he directly abandoned everything and disappeared with Vivian for half a year, and I, disheartened, chose to abort. But I don't hate Vivian, because if not for her impatiently forcing me out, I might have been kept in the dark, given birth to the child, and suffered for a lifetime. Thinking of this, I took a deep breath. If I didn't want to divorce, I wouldn't have aborted the child, so now you should believe me and call the fire department, right? David, with an ugly expression, returned the phone to me. I took out the phone and was about to call when my parents came running with groceries. What's going on? How did it catch fire while we were out for a bit? I already called the fire department. Claire, are you okay? Seeing my parents standing there fine, David took a deep breath. Your parents are here, then who's inside? The fire inside the house was getting bigger, and standing close felt like being scalded. I walked a few steps towards my parents and sighed at David. I said it earlier, inside are. Vivian's expression was somewhat strange. She suddenly interrupted me. David, haven't you seen it yet? There's no one inside the house at all. Just as I said earlier, all this is her pretending, to avoid divorcing you, to morally blackmail you. At first, she said it was your parents. After knowing your parents went traveling, she had nothing to say, could only pretend to be pitiful and sign, then specifically made you look at the album. All this is to make you feel bad. She just hopes you'll tear up the divorce agreement because of this and reconcile with her. My parents heard this and were even angrier than me. What nonsense are you talking? Claire is not someone who likes to lie. David, others may not understand Claire, but don't you? Now you're bewitched by this vixen, she's causing you to lose your wife and family, can't you see that? Moreover, Claire has long wanted to divorce you. It's the divorce agreement you sent that had issues, all leaving Claire with nothing. How could she sign? David frowned. Seeing that the truth was about to come out, Vivian quickly clutched her belly. David, my belly hurts, hurry and take me to the hospital, I'm afraid something will happen to our child. This sentence completely deprived David of the ability to think. He helped Vivian into the car but didn't forget to say as he left, Claire, see you at the Civil Affairs Bureau on Monday, I hope you don't find more reasons or excuses. Shortly after David drove away, the ambulance and fire truck arrived. Under the firefighters' strenuous efforts, the fire was quickly controlled, and Devon and Daphne inside were carried out. They appeared unburned. However, the medical staff explained to me, actually, in fires, the most important thing isn't the fire itself, but mainly the thick smoke. Inhaling it can easily lead to poisoning. So we need to take the patients to the hospital immediately for examination and rescue. I nodded. Since my own arm was also burned and I needed to go to the hospital, I let my parents go rest at the hotel themselves, while I followed to the hospital. At the hospital, the doctor simply bandaged me, then explained Devon and Daphne's condition. The two probably tried to get up after the fire started, but accidentally fell, hitting their heads on the bed, causing them to faint. Once fainted, they inhaled a large amount of toxic smoke. They're currently being resuscitated, but the situation is not optimistic. However, there's a good treatment plan now, entering a hyperbaric oxygen chamber, combined with current advanced domestic and international technologies. It's just that the cost will be higher. But the effect will definitely be better. I glanced at the rescue room light and immediately told the doctor, use it, no matter what, don't worry about the price, use it all. Anyway, ultimately, I wouldn't have to bear this money. The doctor nodded, gave me the bill to pay, but the staff at the payment counter swiped my card and apologetically said, this card can't be swiped, please change to another card. I thought my card was demagnetized, so I switched several in a row, but none worked. I immediately called the bank and learned that the primary cardholder had frozen my supplementary card. To unfreeze it, the primary account must operate. I was using David's supplementary card, so I immediately picked up the phone to call David, but only then remembered that all my contact methods had long been blocked by him. With no choice, I had to go to Vivian's home to try my luck. Walking downstairs, I saw the light on in Vivian's 10th floor home. It seemed my luck was not bad, as they had the divorce agreement and no longer needed to hide. They directly went home openly. With complex emotions, I knocked on Vivian's door. It was David who opened, wearing an apron. Seeing me, he seemed not surprised at all and said coldly, you still know to come apologize? Do you know that because of your parents' harsh words, Vivian's belly hurt for half a day? I rolled my eyes inwardly. I'm not here to apologize. I'm here to ask you, on what grounds did you freeze my card? I've signed the divorce agreement as you wished, assets divided equally, although I'm using your supplementary card, ultimately it's my money. David seemed to see me for the first time. I really didn't expect you'd become such a money grubber. You're right, I froze your card, but I won't unfreeze it for you. Seeing my puzzled face, David continued, it was Vivian who taught me. She said you've signed and always emphasized dissatisfaction with previous agreements, showing you care a lot about money. Since you care so much about money, I froze your card. Moreover, your parents' villa was burned and definitely needs money to repair. The money you're spending now is still our marital property. I don't want to pay to repair your parents' villa. But rest assured, once we get the divorce certificate on Monday, what's yours won't escape. Why are you in a hurry? Of course, I wasn't in a hurry. But Devon and Daphne were waiting for money to save their lives and couldn't wait until Monday. Although I could wash my hands of it, since Devon and Daphne had the accident in my home, if they really died, I wouldn't feel comfortable. So I used my foot to block the door David was about to close and directly showed him the photos of Devon and Daphne on my phone. David, look clearly. It's your parents lying in the hospital waiting for money to save their lives, not me trying to take advantage of you. I didn't lie to you then, it was your parents in the fire. If not for you delaying the rescue time, your parents wouldn't be in such critical condition now. David stared at my phone for a moment, then hurriedly took out his own phone to call Devon and Daphne to confirm I wasn't lying. The call connected but was hung up. Vivian came out from the door. Claire, don't you feel disgusting? Always using such things to curse uncle and aunt. David, don't worry. I just messaged uncle and aunt, they're fine traveling abroad and haven't returned. If you don't believe, look. While saying this, Vivian took out her phone and showed her chat page with Daphne. Daphne had indeed replied, don't message me if nothing's wrong, busy. I was somewhat puzzled. David's phone also rang. He opened it and played Daphne's voice reply, I'm driving, inconvenient to answer, what's up, son? After listening to the voice, David was quite angry. Claire, are you crazy? Vivian looked at the photos on my phone, uncle and aunt, why are you using such AI-synthesized fake photos to deceive David? David didn't give me a chance to speak, directly kicked my foot away, and closed the door in my face. I was extremely puzzled, unable to figure out what was going on. After all, I had seen Devon and Daphne get into the ambulance to the hospital with my own eyes, but the message David just received was indeed Daphne's voice. I knocked on the door, thinking to have David come with me to the hospital to check. But no matter how I knocked or what I said, David acted as if he didn't hear, and instead, neighbors came out pointing and gossiping. Before I could think long, the hospital called me, urging me to arrange payment quickly, or Devon and Daphne would die. Helpless, I returned to the hospital, directly wanting to ignore everything. But seeing Devon and Daphne's appearance for real, I felt unbearable and thought of it as doing good to accumulate virtue for myself, so I started calling relatives and friends to borrow money. But David was faster than me, he probably sensed I needed money, so he had already announced our divorce on Facebook, telling everyone not to lend me money. I had a headache worse than ever. After understanding the situation, the nurse suggested, you can totally call the police, if your husband doesn't believe you, surely he won't disbelieve the police. My eyes lit up. I immediately chose to call the police, but neither my calls nor the police's were answered by David. I had to take the police car to Vivian's building, but her room light was off, the door wouldn't open, and asking neighbors revealed. It turned out that shortly after I left, the two had taken their luggage and disappeared. Probably afraid I'd bother them again. I had to call my parents, wanting them to use their savings for emergency, but it was still too late. Devon and Daphne didn't even have a chance to open their eyes and directly passed away. Seeing them dead, I also sighed. This time, it really couldn't be blamed on me. I truly did my best. Soon, the day arrived at the agreed Monday with David. Since I didn't go to the Civil Affairs Bureau, David directly brought Vivian to the hospital. As soon as David saw me, he was furious. Do you know how long I waited at the Civil Affairs Bureau door? On such a hot day, with Vivian pregnant, are you trying to kill her? Vivian frowned. Claire, what will it take for you to divorce? Fulfilling us and letting yourself go, isn't that good? Seeing Vivian's red eyes, David became more anxious. Claire, when did you become like this? Wasn't it you who said back then, if in love, be together, if not, separate, now why are you shamelessly clinging to me? Seeing my calm face, David couldn't help rolling his eyes. What are you going to say this time? What reason to find? Is it that your hand is injured, so you can't sign? Or saying something happened to my parents or yours? But no matter what you say, I won't believe it. Today, this marriage, I must divorce. Looking at David before me, I only felt I was blind back then. How didn't I see he was so heartless? But I really couldn't be bothered to say one more word to him. So I fiercely slapped him. Shut up. Then, before he went mad, I threw Devon and Daphne's death certificates in his face. Look for yourself what this is. After reading, David directly threw them on the ground. You haven't acted enough in this play, but I've long seen enough. I couldn't be bothered to waste more words with him. I directly pulled him and dragged him into the morgue, pointing at Devon and Daphne's bodies. Go see for yourself if that's your parents or AI-made fakes. David stared dumbfounded at Devon and Daphne, taking a while to react that I had not been lying all along. He knelt on both knees and began to cry bitterly. How could this be? How could my parents die? They were clearly fine vacationing abroad, traveling. How could this happen? Naturally, I couldn't explain why, but still couldn't hold back. Isn't it all caused by you why they're like this? It was you who snatched my phone and wouldn't let me call the fire department. you who delayed in various ways leading them to inhale toxic smoke, and you who inexplicably froze my card, causing them to miss the chance to survive. No matter which step, if you could have believed me a little or been a bit kinder, your parents wouldn't have died so miserably. Instead of asking me, ask yourself, what great grudge do you have against your parents to harm them like this? David collapsed even more. I just snorted coldly, all right, when you're done crying, message me, I'll go to the Civil Affairs Bureau then. After saying that, I didn't linger and directly left the hospital. However, I never received David's message. Instead, I waited for the arrogant Vivian coming to force me out. As soon as she came in, she directly sat on the sofa. You're very smug now, right? David is living in hell because of uncle and aunt's matter and has no mind for divorce. Was this your plan from the beginning? I'm telling you, even if you occupy the title of David's wife, it can't change the reality that David doesn't love you. I advise you not to struggle anymore. Take the initiative to find David and divorce. After all, I've already conceded a lot. Before, I originally planned to leave you with nothing, but pity, you're not stupid and absolutely refuse to sign. If not for my child unable to wait, I wouldn't agree to you taking away money that belongs to me. I somewhat impatiently interrupted Vivian. Stop pretending, the fire was set by you, right? Vivian was stunned. However, she didn't deny it but generously admitted, correct, you're quite smart. I frowned, why? Vivian rolled her eyes, why? That day, I secretly ditched David, wanting to burn you to death, but unexpectedly, heaven favored me so much that the annoying Devon and Daphne were there too. Pity, you crawled out. But fortunately, under my guidance, David didn't discover anything and instead caused Devon and Daphne's death, saving me from two hateful people. I snorted coldly, do you know this is illegal? This is murder. Vivian shrugged indifferently, so what, do you have evidence? Moreover, if not for those two old immortals refusing to accept me, why would I take such a risky move? Besides, I'm doing this for the child in my belly. I finally found a stupid rich patsy. Am I supposed to give up and find another? Hearing this, I was thoroughly shocked. The child in your belly isn't David's? Don't you fear I'll tell David? Vivian laughed even harder. You can say, but do you think David will believe? He didn't believe you even after seeing photos of his parents being rescued. How could he believe these things you say? You have no idea how many things I've done during the time with him. He won't believe you anymore. Moreover, since I came in, I've had the recording jammer on. Even if you recorded, it's useless. I shook my head and snorted coldly, no need for recording, because I have witnesses. Vivian was puzzled. I didn't explain more and directly opened the bedroom door in front of her. The bedroom was full of people, fire investigators, police, and David on the verge of collapse. Vivian's face instantly darkened. How are you here? Of course, because of me. After the fire investigators had to investigate. Upon investigation, they found the fire started suspiciously, not like an accident, more like arson. So David immediately brought police and traffic police to find me for investigation. I wasn't panicked but explained to everyone, actually, I also suspect the fire was arson. The reason is simple, actually, the fire wasn't very big and was extinguished. But afterward, I searched and couldn't find Devon and Daphne's phones at all. Yet, David and Vivian received replies from Daphne. Being able to get Daphne's phone means this person knew about the fire. Seeing the fire and not reporting it can only mean that she set the fire. The police and fire investigators naturally agreed with my statement. Even David reacted, feeling something was wrong. After all, the messages he received were indeed from Daphne. But at that time, Daphne was already in a coma. How could she send him messages? The few were about to leave to continue investigating, but Vivian knocked on my door. In a flash, I pushed everyone into the bedroom. After hearing my explanation, Vivian collapsed. David, listen to my explanation, it's not like that. At this moment, David was going crazy. Explain what? Is the child in your belly mine? Or is the fire not set by you? Or did you deliberately instigate me to freeze Claire's card knowing my parents were waiting for money to save their lives? Vivian naturally couldn't explain these and could only dryly say, David, but I love you, even if the child in my belly isn't yours, I can continue to bear yours after giving birth. David didn't look at Vivian, just wearily rubbed his brow. You've caused me to lose my love, my child, my parents, and you still want to explain? Save your explanation for the judge. Even if I exhaust all efforts, I'll find a way to get you sentenced to death. Seeing David wasn't joking, Vivian stopped pretending. Blame me? How can these things be blamed on me? It takes two to tango. If you didn't want to cheat, how could I have the chance to latch onto you? Besides, now you know to say Claire is your love? At the fire scene then, weren't you decisively threatening her to sign first? If not for you, your parents wouldn't have died. David completely collapsed. Vivian, I guarantee, I'll make you pay with your life. Vivian sneered, pay with life, I'm pregnant now, even if I set fire and killed, I won't get death penalty, only death with reprieve. As long as I reform well, maybe in over 20 years I'll be out, by then, I'll still be young, and I can watch you live in hell. Besides, they died in the hospital, not in the fire, whether I can be convicted of murder is uncertain. Vivian laughed smugly, I advise you to sign a letter of understanding for me, let me out early, I can still have my son provide for you in old age, saving you from being alone for life. David understood what Vivian said was true, but he clearly couldn't accept the reprieve she mentioned, even less that she might be out in over 20 years. He suddenly rushed to Vivian's front, eyes bloodshot. If the law can't punish you, I'll personally punish you. If the law won't let you die, I'll make you die. After saying that, before everyone reacted, he directly hugged Vivian and jumped from the balcony. Because during the fall, Vivian was pressed under David, so Vivian died on the spot, one body two lives, while David, having a buffer, didn't die. After rescue and treatment, David had high paraplegia, except for his right hand and head movable, other parts had no sensation. Precisely because of this, he couldn't go to prison and could only be sentenced to probation. When he recovered somewhat, I arranged to go with him to the Civil Affairs Bureau for divorce. During this time, David kept apologizing to me, but didn't expect my forgiveness, nor begged to reconcile. In his words, he wasn't worthy. The divorce agreement we signed before ultimately wasn't used. Because David insisted on leaving with nothing. I'm not someone who hates money, so I didn't act coy and directly agreed, the extra money and assets, just consider them the punishment he deserved for betraying the relationship. When signing the divorce, David actually smiled, heaven left me my right hand, probably just to let me sign the divorce and set you free. Claire, I hope you'll be happy in the future and meet a better man. I hummed in response, took the divorce certificate, and left without looking back. I heard news of David again 2 months later. After divorcing me, he shut himself at home alone without eating or drinking, starving to death. Because he was alone, it was long after death that he was discovered. Hearing this news, I didn't feel surprised, he was such a proud person, making him lie in bed for life was no better than killing him. Perhaps death was liberation for him. Moreover, dead, maybe he could go down and apologize to Devon and Daphne.